cusps because cusps, and it's funny because I was
Do do do
born in
do
the
do 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 do.
Welcome to Growing with the Stars. I'm Katie, your resident nerdy Hellenistic astrologer.
And I'm Kat, your resident noob and question asker.
Today we are talking about the sun. We are finally getting to talk about working with the sun. What is it, what it's not, and how it can be really helpful when we think about leadership and our leadership styles. Because in this day and age, with all of the mess that is going on, we need more leaders now than ever. And I don't think personally anyone is coming to save us. We're literally recording this just after Jimmy Kimmel was essentially postponed or taken off indefinitely from ABC for having the most mild criticisms recently. So yeah, that sort of is the high level about this episode.
I did see also another video that was by, I want to say, Jon Stewart, talking about comedians being the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak, for these kinds of situations. So take of that what you will.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. Before we move on, I'm glad to see people are very willing to cancel their Hulus, their Disney Plus subscriptions. That's probably one of the best ways to capitalism is to hit them in their pocketbooks. But we are here. We'll eventually probably have a whole episode on money and finances that does come up in astrology. But today we're going to talk about the sun signs. The sun signs are something that we typically know the best. It's usually the most approachable, accessible piece of astrology. And that's partially because, right, our calendar year is solar. The sun's basically in the same spot almost every year. You might see like a degree or two off, but whenever it's the beginning of June, the sun is in Gemini. The sun more or less is in almost the exact same spot within a day or so each calendar year. Um, it does tell us a lot, right? But what it's really about is not like our whole personality, which is what you often see with like pop astrology, right? Like I'm a Sagittarius or I'm a Scorpio. People are usually talking about their sun sign. What the sun really tells us in astrology is things like our leadership style, which we're going to focus on today, our intellectual, sort of mental focus. A lot of the mind is with the sun traditionally. We also sometimes see father figures or fathers associated with the sun. And ultimately, when I'm working with clients a lot one on one, the sun and our sun will tell us a lot about how we want to stand out or where and when do we stand out. And because the sun is the brightest thing. Literally, it is the light illuminating this room. You can't see really anything else in the sky when the sun is out and about. And like a lot of our episodes, just to kind of keep this contextual, we're not going to have every sun combo. We're not going to describe that. We're going to go through each of the sun signs, sun and the different zodiac signs this time around. And in our next episode, we'll go through the sun and the different houses.
I have a question. So I had somebody tell me one time that in pop astrology, a lot of what they're actually writing for is actually your rising sign. And so I'm curious is if that's like what you would read in like the newspaper is like, if that's
Yeah.
something that's what it is. Like, is that why? Because like I didn't really ever vibe with my like sun horoscope, in that way.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so what you'll see in newspapers with horoscopes, right, is you'll see all the zodiac signs and then sort of the calendar time frame, right, of when the sun is in Aries or when the sun is in Aquarius. Um, and then a horoscope, a little write up with it. Most astrologers that I know who write horoscopes, whether it's dailies, which is what you often see in newspapers, monthlies, and magazines, are writing for the rising sign. If you really want to get themes, topics, That's how they're typically writing. And so I usually tell folks to read for their rising sign if that's what you're doing. And the sun, because the sun is important. I'm not going to deny that the sun is, I'm not trying to underplay it, but it's one piece of a larger puzzle. And because we're so used to our sun sign, we often forget that there's lots of other things going on, right? We look at not only where the sun is, we look at what house it's in. And as a traditional astrologer, the sun matters more if you were born during daylight hours when the sun is shining. But if you were born at night, right, you're born, let's say, at 2 a.m., 9 p.m., the moon is typically more important for you, right? There are some exceptions, but that the moon would be the thing that you probably more resonate with than your sun sign.
That actually
Um,
explains a ton to me because I didn't even really know I had more than a, you know what I mean? Like you don't even really know the depth of astrology until you find out there's depth to astrology. Who knows that there's more than a horoscope in a newspaper? I had no idea I had a rising sign or a moon sign. And then you just said like about night charts. Well, I'm a night chart. And so I've always felt more in tune with my moon, I
yeah.
guess, once I started learning a little more. So I always kind of felt a little bummed about that. But actually, again, going back to before, like I didn't feel like those horoscopes that were more based, again, like you said, on the rising sign, it seems like really were descriptive of me. And so
Yeah.
like as I've delved in a little bit more, it does feel like the deeper you get into it, you do find more that sort of resonates with you. But I do still feel a little out of touch with that side of my chart, to be fair. Like I don't quite feel, and maybe that's because I'm a night chart.
It can definitely be part of it. Things like if your sun is in what we would call a house that is in a blind spot to the ascendant. So that would be the second house, the sixth house, the eighth, and the 12th. Typically, you might have a harder time accessing it or really personally understanding those placements because the personal part of the chart we've talked about before is the rising sign. And so it sort of is like your personal blind spot has sort of been, are those places. It's still part of your life, but you just don't see it as well. It's kind of like, I, there's hair on the back of my head. It is my hair. I don't know what it looks like. I need like a mirror held behind me. And partially, for newspapers, they don't you're not going to be writing, how to find your moon sign for thousands, millions of people. That's just going to be impossible with the way our calendar, we don't have good information to make that easy for people to just like look at quickly. Whereas like your sun is really easy to look at in our solar calendar. Um,
I think it's funny. I dated myself by saying newspaper, not even a news
right.
website. Oh my gosh.
I mean, yeah, if you look at it online, if you're looking at it on a paper, either one. The next thing to say we gotta explain is cusps because cusps, and it's funny because I was
Do do do
born in
do
the
do 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 do.
exactly that's how I feel about it. I'm gonna probably have some hard news for some of you. As somebody that would be typically considered a Taurus Gemini cusp myself, that's not how it works in astrology. You don't have cusp energy. We don't think of planets, and there are no man's land in astrology that would make a cusp a thing. Your sun is in one sign or the other. The sun might change signs that day or around the day you were born. But if your sun is, let's say, at 1 degree of Pisces, it doesn't have Aquarius vibes. There might be other reasons you have both Piscean energy and Aquarian energy, but it's not because your sun is at this no man's land, because that's just not, it's not how astrology works in almost any tradition that I have engaged with or seen or gone to practitioners, whether you're a really modern astrologer doing evolutionary or you're a really traditional astrologer. It's just not, I'm not trying to take things away from you, but I'm trying to get really clear that you might find that mixed energy or sort of that feeling of duality based on planets being spread between those signs. right? You might have Mercury in Pisces and the sun in Aquarius. Really, really common, right? Or you might have your sun in Taurus and then a Gemini stellium. Those things happen and it's very chart by chart specific, but we wouldn't ever say that you're a cusper or that you have cusp energy.
I mean, the sun might have changed signs the day you were born, but you reflecting the qualities of like both those signs is not necessarily dependent totally on the sun. It's also reflective of your chart as a whole.
Yeah. So an example I often bring up is Hailey Bieber. Let me show you her chart. So let's take a look at Hailey Bieber's chart. She is an example. Let me make this a little bit smaller so we can sort of see it. This is from Astro Databank. People will often talk about Hailey Bieber as a cusper, as somebody that is on the riding the Scorpio Sagittarius cusp. Now, if we look at based on her time of birth, that year the sun was solidly in Sagittarius. And if anything, she's a lot of Sagittarius energy. She's got Pluto and Mercury as well. Even if the ascendant isn't 100% correct, she's got three planets in Sagittarius. So she's not, the cusper isn't a thing. If she was baby born the day before, the sun would have been in Scorpio and that would have shifted things for her. But planets are either in one sign or the other. Even Venus, right? Her Venus is at 29 Libra. It's still in Libra, even if it's at the edge of the sign. It doesn't suddenly like start to leak Scorpio energy. We have to do this before we get into the different sun signs because I'm trying to avoid any questions of like, well, what if my sun is at like the very beginning of like, what if my sun is on the cusp between Scorpio and Sag? What if I'm, between Leo and Cancer?
Well, I mean, like for me, I have not a sun, but a Jupiter at 0 degrees Cancer, but that's at 0 degrees, right? So that's would indicate a shift, a changeover, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because Hailey Bieber also has like she has 0 degrees Saturn in Aries. So Saturn has just entered that sign, right? And so it does highlight there's a kind of newness to that experience, but it doesn't share that experience with Pisces. And if you're not sure, once again, you can always look up your sun on astro.com, astro-seek.com. You're going to need your birthday, your birthplace, your birth time. And if you're still not sure about your birth time, I always want to highlight and shout out lots of astrologers do rectification, which is a way of sort of reverse engineering, and that can help you narrow it down. If like let's say you could have been born between a 5 hour period and the sun would have changed signs during that period. Rectification's a really good way of narrowing that down and figuring it out. And my cat Dusk agrees.
I saw him incoming and I was like, he's here to save the day. Woo!
Exactly. Yeah, he's a little Leo. He needs to be seen at all times. We'll see how quiet or not he is today. Let's dig into some of the actual sun signs, shall we? The first one I want to talk about is the sun in Aries. And honestly, traditionally this is fantastic. The sun loves being in Aries. The sun is what we call exalted here. It's raised up. Um, and it's a partially we see that because, right, the Aries season begins with the spring equinox, and that's when the light is growing and expanding. So the sun gets to do more of its thing. Okay. Um, And we see here lots of rewards around leadership, courage, trying new things. Um, these folks are really often good at trailblazing, at quick decisions. Their weakness can be long-term planning. A great example of this is actually Celine Dion, who has the sun in Aries. Let's see if I can. For those that are curious, let's see if I can show you her chart. She's actually a pretty intense Aries.
Yeah,
I
she's
thought I was like,
she's she's pretty intense as a person. If you know
yeah,
the story about her and her husband.
yeah, that's a whole other wild story. But yeah, see, she's a Leo rising and she has the sun. She's got a lot of stuff in Aries, but including the sun at about 10 degrees of Aries. Um, and you think about that sort of boldness, the way she sings, the way she's really willing to take up space. I literally was just watching a video of her from the 90s when all the divas were on the VH1. I don't know if you ever saw it, where she was like willing to sort of go toe to toe with Aretha Franklin in the You Make Me, I think it's You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, which like most folks would have been like, I don't got that chutzpah. And they're sort of riffing. And she did, right? You get that sort of courage, you get that sort of recklessness, that sort of willingness to take up space. It's very Aries sun coded, for better or worse, depending on how you view how that event went down. And as far as these folks being leaders, right? The thing that I like to remind these folks is like you're really courageous, you're really fast, you're really willing to go at it. Not everybody has your speed, and not everybody has your perspective. And the two things I like to remind these folks is like you guys are often very natural, very eager leaders. But how and when do you need to slow down to bring others along that journey? Part of being a leader is having people with you, right? What is your audience? Where are they at? How is your community engaged with it versus you just dragging them along by their collars? And the other piece I have to kind of remind these folks is sometimes quick decisions incredibly important, right? Periods of crisis, conflict, you don't have always the time to think it through. We're not always in those moments. And so, how and who can help you with sort of long-term strategy? When is that risk taking really worth it? And when is it that you need to slow down and do something with a little bit more sedate pace?
Celine Dion's stuck in my head so hard right now. I swear, I'm like, baby, 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 when you kiss me
Touch me
like
like this.
this.
Can you hold me like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's meant to be belted. You can't sing Celine Dion in a small voice.
Oh my God, no.
The next sun sign is a very different vibe, and we're going to be going from Celine Dion to Queen Elizabeth II.
That is
And,
quite the shift, I will say.
right?
Like,
Um, and that's
quite the
often the
shift.
vibe from Aries to Taurus, right? You go from the courage, the recklessness to a fixed earth sign that is Venus ruled, right? Aries is cardinal fire ruled by Mars. It's a very different vibe. And Taurus is all about being steady. It's very stubborn. It's much more about ease and consistency. Slow and steady is the name of their game. These are people who are powerful at follow through and maintaining things. And they're very practical, they're very tangible. They're and so that's what they're going to be good at. And Queen Elizabeth, if she was known for anything, was about, the preserving and the maintaining of monarchy, right? Um, I will show you her chart. So she is also, I mean, and part of that flavor is a Capricorn rising. Once again, we get that sort of Saturn aspect kind of coming through. But she's got Venus at the very beginning of Taurus. She just squeaked in literally hours after Aries season. But once again, we sort of see that leadership style as like thinking about what is maintained, how do we move forward, but from a place of very practical, very grounded, very rooted. And interestingly, I think with her, like we don't need to go into the houses, but the fifth house aspect of children and progeny is a really interesting thing for a monarch and a leader to be constantly thinking about, right?
Well, now you've piqued my interest, so I'll have to like tap you for that later
Yeah,
in a side chat or something.
exactly. Well, we'll have to come back to the fifth house next time. Um, but that was a lot of right. What her whole focus was, how does the monarchy survive through the 20th century? And she saw really great changes, and it was about stability through that. Now, her difficulties also highlight the problem sometimes we see with Taurus, right? When we start to get into like the 80s, as Princess Diana comes on the scene, there's this feeling that the monarchy's out of date, that they're almost too consistent, they're almost too old-fashioned. And that can also be the problem with Taurus, is you're so good at being predictable and steady and refusing change that that can become a problem as a leader if you don't evolve enough. You're not keeping up with your community, with your people. And so that's the thing I often talk about with folks with the sun in Taurus, which is, hey, how is part of your practice allowing change and evolution? How is pivoting part of something that is can be a steady practice? Which sounds weird, but if you think of it like yoga, if you never twist and turn, your body's really not good at doing twists and turns, and you have to like add stretching in. You can't be flexible if you don't, do flexibility stuff.
My brain immediately went to Pokemon. I was like thinking of like evolving as a Pokemon and getting like into the like stronger form of Pokemon.
I love that. Yeah, because that is part of it. If you don't do it, it doesn't go anywhere. Um, the other piece is that these folks can be so practical and so tangible that sometimes there's things emotional or spiritual or, things that drive folks that aren't, it isn't always something that you can touch, something that you can see. And how is that something that's important to acknowledge with folks, right? Sometimes you have to be a little more touchy-feely to get things done, to acknowledge people's need to be seen, to acknowledge people's need for validation, to acknowledge when somebody's upset. That sort of emotional work of being a leader can also, if you're a little rigid, if you don't, and especially if you don't have a lot of water placements, that can be the other side of Taurus. That's a little harder to access. The next one, once again, it's always funny how different each zodiac sign is from each other. We're going to Gemini, which is, if Taurus is slow and steady, Gemini is like blurp, 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 blurp. Um, and these folks are changeable, right? It's a mutable air sign. It is Mercury ruled, so it's youthful. We see a lot of code switching, right? Connection and sort of an ability to sort of change how they talk or sort of appear in different circumstances. Um, Leadership for these folks is often synthesizing ideas. Almost think of it like the hummingbird, the pollinator, or the bee. They're really busy. They're very fast. They're like bringing things together and synthesizing them, sometimes in coherent ways, sometimes not. We're going to talk about two different examples this time because they're a little triggering. Because the first example, unfortunately, is the current president, Donald Trump. I think about his chart too often, but he is a Leo rising and he is a Gemini sun. And so you see that sort of changeability, talking out of both sides of his mouth comes up, right? A lot of his base, his leadership is synthesizing people that are both economically disenfranchised and billionaires. I'm not like, and once again, we're going to talk about a very different example, but this is a good example from a like astrologically on point, but it also is a reminder that like you can be really fucked up using your astrology effectively.
It's just one of those things too, like you've said, like every sign has a shadow, and if you play into that shadow,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The other one that I like to bring up, also a Leo rising, also a Gemini sun, very different, is Marilyn Monroe, which is funny because a lot of people don't realize how mercurial she really was. So she is also a Leo rising. She has the sun and Mercury together in Gemini. Part of that was like she played being the airhead. She plays the sort of bombshell, breathy character. And I believe she also like wrote a book of poetry. Like she had many facets to her. And a lot of what we think about is the sort of Venus bombshell. But her curiosity and all of these things are also sort of there, and is also quite yes and in a way that people often maybe could have missed in the character she played.
Wonder how similar her chart, or if they're what's similar in her chart to Paris Hilton, because they
Yeah.
seem really similar in the way that they both kind of, Paris Hilton definitely, put that persona on to, and then later, obviously, like the world was like, wow.
Yeah. Part of that, I think, is they're both air sun. So there is this sort of intellectualizing of identity, intellectualizing the sense of self. And they both have Neptune in the first. Paris Hilton's a Sagittarius rising with a Libra sun. Marilyn Monroe is a Leo rising with Neptune and Leo and the sun. And so there's an intellectualizing of, and I don't know exactly where her Mercury is, but Mercury in the air signs, especially Gemini, and I think of it Libra, are more playful and more movable. And so they have that sort of code switching ability and that freedom to do that, whether it's playing a breathy character, an airhead, or a ditz, to play into your expectations. And so I think that's something to kind of keep in mind as well. But we'll eventually have to talk about it. But Neptune in the first, I have seen with quite a few celebrities, is often folks who do a really good job of creating a larger than life mythos around themselves. Um,
Is
that
Dolly Parton one?
Kim Kardashian is, Paris Hilton is, uh, Taylor Swift is, I believe. Dolly Parton, I don't think is. Um, but there's probably a lot of others that I haven't looked at. But Neptune, especially in the first or on the midheaven, can really make people see you in a very like not a dreamy way, but almost you're more of a mythical idea than a person.
Playing that against like a Gemini sun, like
Yeah. When I talk to these folks, and I think about this because I'm also a Gemini sun, which is how can your gift of communication, right, your gift of quickly and easily synthesizing ideas help others and lead them? How is information sharing and synthesizing information something that can be really useful to people? And I think in this day and age, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and we need folks who are good with those things more than ever.
Katie, what are you doing to synthesize information and distribute it into the world right now?
Yeah, here we are on a podcast trying to give good astrology information. It's so weird.
It
It's
doesn't
almost like
make
a
sense at
pattern.
all. I don't. What?
Now, these folks are also really responsive. Mutable signs are very reactive. They're not always very good at initiating or maintaining things. And so the other piece of it is how do you provide follow through? And because Gemini is the twin, sometimes you need like someone to bounce off of. How can somebody else help you with follow through? For me personally, having a podcast with someone else, make sure I actually get shit done and I have somebody to be accountable to. And that's why I'm actually able to make this a reality because also me talking simply to myself on a screen sounds horrific. I'm not against other people doing it. I love that some people on YouTube and other places can do that. I don't know how. I feel incredibly awkward. But that is definitely me being a mercurial, very Gemini person because I have the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter all in Gemini. So if you're scared, totally get it. You can run away now. I won't be offended.
You can also just find a Leo who's excited to be there with you if you want, if you're a Gemini sign and wanna find a Leo sun who's there to just laugh on the other side and ask you lots of questions if you don't feel like talking at yourself in the camera.
This is why it works. Whether or not we knew it, it was going to work out. Um, the next sun sign is a little more emotional, a little more tender, and this is Cancer, right? So we're getting back into the water signs, or we're starting the water signs, excuse me. They're cardinal, it's moon ruled. And these folks I see as like emotional leaders, emotional caretakers. They really relate to people as people first. They sometimes can have a little bit of a martyr complex when it comes to being a leader. They're taking on maybe too much emotional caretaking. They're very sentimental, but they also evolve a lot. And this example that I love is actually Princess Diana. I think she's a really good example of leading as a Cancer sun. She's a Sagittarius rising, the sun in Cancer, the moon in Aquarius. A lot of her leadership or the things that she was known for, right, was in a way that was caretaking, whether that was working on patients with HIV and AIDS. She was one of the first people to publicly touch an AIDS patient during the AIDS epidemic. People, they weren't getting a lot of, in the beginning, people didn't really know how it was transmitted. So there was a lot of like not touching of them. And then even after when we knew it was sexually transmitted, people still wouldn't touch them. And so her being willing to go and visit and hold their hand, right, is this very sort of symbol of care and is also quite radical for the moment. She did a lot of work around things like landmines and victims of landmines. I could kind of go on, but right, we get that emotional, maternal sensitivity that she really embraced and sort of used to to move conversations, to move society forward in some really powerful ways. I think one of the big things to really remember about Cancer and any planet that's in the sign of Cancer is that it is ruled by the moon. And the moon is the fastest moving planet traditionally that we work with. And so the evolutions of her over time, when you think about sort of the young woman that was engaged to Prince at the time, Prince Charles, to the divorcee, right, in her sort of revenge dress era. There's a lot of evolution, there's a lot of change, and there's still sort of this emotional core that she brings to it. And that's really common I see with Cancer placements is that they evolve. They don't just change. It's not like the mutable signs where they can kind of go back and forth and they're sort of that aspect. It's a constant moving forward. The moon never retrogrades from our perspective on Earth. And so there's always this sort of evolution and growth aspect where they're sort of you look back and you're like, that was that person, but it's been 5 years and they just sort of look completely different. I mean, the difference between, let's just talk about Cancer and Gemini for a second. We'll talk about their planetary rules, right? Cancer ruled by the moon constantly moves forward. Mercury rules Gemini and it is very fast, but it has like 3 retrogrades a year. And so if you look back at like Trump and his tariffs, there's the constant wishy-washiness of what's the tariff, what's actually going to be going forward, is it moving forward, is it not moving forward? And so you see this sort of balancing piece that's actually more unstable versus the kind of the thing with a Cancer placement is that they don't typically go backwards. There's an evolution of they do a thing and then they move to the next thing, or there's sort of an evolutionary aspect where there's sort of the constant, there's a forward progression and shifting and changing, but they won't return to a thing. Whereas Gemini, especially, and Virgo somewhat as well, will have more of that sort of back and forth and weaving aspect to it. And it can be healthy. You know, there can be sort of that review aspect or sort of the reaffirming and strengthening of previous stuff. It's not always toxic, but that evolution actually, in some ways, is a little bit slower because it includes more pivoting back and forth. So, to wrap up Cancer and Cancer suns, the questions and the things I like to kind of focus with them is like your emotional first and sort of that tender care leadership is great. But when is that hindering your ability to make tough calls, right? When is that getting in the way of the logical things that maybe need to get done? Because sometimes that emotion and caretaking can actually hinder the growth of maybe your community or make you a little myopic around some decisions because, you know, it's coming not from a bad place, but can sometimes miss important data. Our emotions are like that. The other piece is the Cancer is the sign of the crab, and there is a hard shell sometimes. And that can make some of them sometimes resistant to listening and hearing feedback. They can get defensive. And so when is it that your walls come up and you get really brittle? And when is it, and what are the situations that allow you to be open to listening, open to feedback, so that you can evolve and grow and do the next best thing. How is it something that can actually help you improve? When is that a gift? So now we are moving on to the sun in his favorite sign, which is Leo. This is the sun's home sign, right? We think of this as the middle of summer in the northern hemisphere. It's a fixed fire sign. And the first thing metaphorically I think of comes, I think, from Austin Coppock, who described it as like the fireplace or the campfire, the place that people want to gather around, that's warm and inviting and bright. And Leo suns kind of have that natural charisma, whether you like it or not. They make people want to gather around them. At their best, they sort of can be really performative, really charming. At their worst, they're a little bit dramatic. They can be a little bit hogging the limelight. They're very stubborn. They're very loyal. Fixed signs are not known for liking to change. They want to be consistent. I think a great example of this, let me pull them up. Um, we're getting a lot of politicians today. Is Bill Clinton. Whether you like him, whether you hate him, he is quite a Leo. He's a Libra rising. We should probably talk about him on a Libra episode because look at that stellium. It's kind of intense. Um, and he's got the sun in Leo. And you just think about his charm in the 90s. Like his big thing from his first election was like playing this I think it was the saxophone.
It was the saxophone, yeah. It was like a big thing. And then the joke was that he smoked cannabis, but he didn't inhale.
Yes, because that's definitely how it works. As a Californian, I can say this with full transparency and expertise. Um, but that's what we think about, right? Is drama, is charisma, and is sort of it's hard to not look at them. I have one more example as well because he just passed, RIP, but is Robert Redford. I didn't expect him saying that would be so difficult. And he is actually a little bit more surprising. He's a Pisces rising, the sun in Leo, and the moon in Virgo. Um, but it also had that like you couldn't look away, right? The man was also fine. That might also be because I'm a Sagittarius moon. He's got Jupiter in Sagittarius, and I am a sucker for Sagittarius placements. But yeah, he also had this real charisma, this real um, you wanted to be around them, right? This sort of natural leadership, this natural gravitas that made it very easy for them to take up space. For these folks, if you're a Leo sun, your sun is so strong and you're a leader, the leadership, the desire to step up and be a leader is often really common. It's really natural for a lot of these folks. And the thing I like to ask them is, when are you the best person to step forward? Which sounds like a hard question, but are you always the best person to lead in a situation? Is somebody else better suited sometimes? And sometimes it is you, and that's great. And it's also okay to step back and let somebody else take the lead. I'll go through ebbs and flows when it's easier and then when it's harder. And I think lacking, like, yeah, are you the best person to step forward? Do you have the capacity to step forward? Um, why are you stepping forward? Are all good questions to sometimes just ask yourself. I don't think you need to do it every single time, right? These are questions to think about more generally. And as you get better at working with your son, it gets easier to handle. You get better at just sort of knowing, like, I'm going to need support on this thing, or I know I need someone to check me here, right? Um, as you get to know yourself better, it's easier to just sort of do that in a way that's either more automatic or you're, it's less, it doesn't have to be as such a conscious effort. But I think capacity and not having capacity to do something is a great call out to make sure that it's not just, yeah, are you the right person, but are you the right person right now? And speaking of minute, if there's any sun sign that's really good at it, it's Virgo. Um,
The
and just
details, you mean?
they're good at the details.
Yeah.
They're so detail oriented. God bless them. Someone's got to be because it's not me. And these are mutable. It's a mutable earth sign. ruled by Mercury. It's very practical, it's very grounded. If Leo is dramatic and a little bit performative, Virgo is humble with a capital H. Um, they are often the they're like the organizational structural leaders. Now, and they're very much the servant leaders. Their caveat can be, and I've literally seen this happen all the time. I have a good friend, somebody I've worked with as well, who's a Virgo sun, who will often say things like, it's easier to just do it myself, which is true. But if you're a leader and in a leadership capacity, that can be a real problem because you're often overworking yourself and under supporting your people. You're not letting them step up and try things because you just want to get things done. A really good example of somebody that has that big Virgo humble energy is a favorite of mine, Keanu Reeves.
Ooh,
This,
okay. Hey, let's go.
we look at this giant ass Virgo stallion. We got the sun, we got Mercury, Uranus, Pluto, all there in the first. And I think his humbleness, that sort of quietness, you see in a lot of different ways. There's lots of videos of him on the New York subway, right? He's not really making a big deal of himself. He's known for working on projects and often giving, trying like giving away some of his money to the crew and other staff on projects that he works on. Um, he's just, he's just known for being kind of a quiet. He's known for being pretty quiet. He's not known for like taking up a whole ton of space. He's known for having this sort of very respectful, like he doesn't, when he takes photos with fans, he doesn't really like, he's not super touchy-feely. And I think that's just something that that speaks to the Virgo-ness of his chart and the Virgo sun, especially, and that sort of not just thinking about himself and what he can do, but a lot of that care for others. I mean, I think Virgo, I think what's also just really interesting is his willingness to play on his own, like make fun of himself, which he does. He plays like a satirical version of himself in Always Be My Maybe. They and I think that goes to show sort of a humbleness or humility about yourself, where a Leo sun has a much harder time with that, typically speaking. Leo placements have a harder time with that. We want to be seen, want to be well liked, and we don't necessarily enjoy being made fun of, and that's okay. Virgo can handle that usually a little bit better. Um, and so I think that just really speaks to Virgo um, really beautifully. Um, Now, I have to push my Virgo folks where I'm like, sometimes you gotta be willing to take up some more space. Sometimes the right thing to do is to kind of be front and center and to toot, and if not to toot your own horn, to make sure other people do it, right? And also, hey, your do-it-yourself mentality, when is that actually hindering? When is that overburdening you? And when is that underutilizing your community, your people, your team, if you will? Now, we have gone around the zodiac from Aries to Libra, and this is in a lot of ways sort of its opposite. This is also a cardinal air sign. It's Venus ruled, but Libra season is the fall equinox in the northern hemisphere. This is when the sunlight is diminishing. So sometimes these folks can struggle a bit with leadership, right? They sort of struggle to take up that space as well. They're very diplomatic, they're very intellectual, they're very social. Um, and their focus is often on how to create that sort of balance, that harmony between folks. They're very like, I think of the diplomat. And they're not always comfortable with the leadership that like requires hard decisions or turning over the apple cart, um, and or being quick about it. Now, what's interesting about this is we do have some people that are not afraid to take up space. It's not always that way. One example is actually Kamala Harris. She is a Gemini rising, sun in Libra. She ran for president, willing to sort of take up space. Um, but it's interesting because I think she had an interview. She had an interview during the campaign where like I think she was joking about, sitting on the couch with her husband trying to like make a decision for what to watch on TV, and they can like it's like the constant sort of back and forth and having difficulty with that. It's a very classic sort of Libra, like, well, this sounds nice or this sounds nice, and it sort of is like wanting everything but not able like having to make one choice can be sometimes be a little bit of a difficulty for these folks. Whether you see yourself as a leader or not, if you have the sun in Libra, it's like, how is it that bringing people together is a kind of leadership? It's a skill set to organize and facilitate groups, whether that's through listening, whether that is sort of mediation, whether that's, even just a potluck or everybody coming together to bring food together. It takes work. And that's okay to sort of see yourself as maybe an atypical leader. And in fact, I think we need more of those now than ever. And if you do feel comfortable being a leader, or you're maybe struggling as a leader, it's like, okay, when does your desire for harmony and balance getting in the way of making decisions? And I think that sort of is the big thing I see with Libra placements is balance is always something that happens over time. You rarely get to see sort of the scales of Libra in perfect harmony at any moment. And that balance is going to be more of an ebb and a flow, right? The scale comes up and the scale comes down. And sort of how do you see balance as something through time than needed in every single static moment? Sometimes being a leader means taking a side, moving forward. That's not going to be, how do I put it? Not everyone's going to agree with every decision you make. And in fact, sometimes the sign of being a good leader is you've pissed off everybody just enough to keep them moving forward. That's not always true, but there are times when you're like, we need to have standards and like rules in place. Like we have all these rules and such in place for like how we write, what we say, and when we say it. And like if we don't have the right implementation, you're just generating more crap for us to fix. And that's sometimes the thing you have to do is you're not always popular as a leader. You're not always well liked as a leader, but you do things to help make people's lives easier in the long run. The next sign I want to talk about, which to me is when this is when the sun is in Scorpio, we are truly in spooky season. Sorry, Thanksgiving. November's is still Halloween to me. Um, Scorpio is a fixed water sign. It is traditionally ruled by Mars. And right, these folks are intense. They're very loyal. These have folks, I think Scorpio sun leaders tend to people that like their people are ride or die. They're focused on loyalty, emotional depth. They're strategic as fuck. And they're perfect at long-term planning. And the example I have for this is the only strategic mama bear, Kris Jenner, right? This woman is like the force behind the Kardashians. She is Virgo rising, Scorpio sun, Cancer moon, and it really shows in her sort of methodicalness and her planning. Um, you know, they didn't get here by accident. And for some ways, if you look at the history of keeping up with the Kardashians, sort of the origin of a lot of their social capital, she's the one really pitching that show. They get the show because Caitlyn Jenner, right, is at the time married to Kris and is the real kind of celebrity of the household. Caitlyn Jenner, right, was an athlete, an Olympic athlete, was really well known previously. I want to say, I don't know my sports as well. I want to say they were more well known in the 80s, early 90s. That's the start of keeping up with the Kardashians. That's the start of her sort of being the force behind the family. And I think she still manages most of the Kardashians. And so I think that's really interesting. Just to sort of see they're well known personally, but the real power is that sort of is being the momager, right? And that Scorpio strategy, which can be a little hidden, right? Scorpio is much more willing to go into depth and be strategic. It doesn't necessarily need to be the bright, visible one. And so for these folks, hey, your long-term skills are incredible. And I think as a leader, sometimes they can get a little conspiratorial, about being leaders and power dynamics and control. That is a trait for Scorpio. And I think like, hey, your long-term strategy, how can that be? That is a useful skill. And how can that be a way that you support community, support your activism goals? How is that something that can really um, move the needle forward, not just for today or tomorrow, but for like a decade, right? And the flip side of that is they're sort of they can sometimes get overly, they can be extreme about loyalty, right? Is hey, when is loyalty over prioritized? When are you creating an intense sort of in group of followers, which can become yes people? And how can that create intimidation or fearful spaces rather than authenticity and truth and an ability to face the difficulty together? The next sign, we know my catnip, my favorite, one of my favorites is Sagittarius. These folks are fun, right? It's mutable fire. They're Jupiter ruled. And I know I'm biased, but they are charismatic. They're often great at the big picture, at philosophy and meaning. Now, where they get into trouble, and we're going to see this with one of the people, is they can talk a big talk and they don't always walk the walk. We're going to show two examples. Now, my favorite is the diva herself, Britney Spears. Um, another Sagittarius, another stellium in the house.
We love you, girly. You are
Um,
so fabulous.
Libra rising, so much in Sagittarius. That's Uranus, Mercury, the Sun, and Neptune. And, she's really known. The third house can, oh, we'll get into that another time, but the third house has a lot to do with the voice. And she has this sort of iconic voice. Oh, baby, baby, right? I'm probably not doing a good imitation, but she's known for that sort of very specific way she sings. There's a lot of fire. It sort of is over the top fashion. Um, the visuals I always think of is Oops, I Did It Again. Red latex suit, aliens. What is the story? Don't worry about the details. Just know that an astronaut fell in love with her and she fucks him up. That's all you need to know. And that's what makes the pop music great. Don't worry about the details. Where is it that when people get into trouble? And we're getting into some Taylor Swift lore here, my friends. So buckle up, which is surprising how much certain celebrities live rent free in my head. We're getting into Jake Gyllenhaal. Am I saying his name right? Swedes.
Jake Gyllenhaal? That's how I've
Yeah.
always heard it pronounced, but I could also be wrong.
I get a little nervous when I see two ways. All right. I think his dad is Nordic. I think his dad is Swedish. If you know, leave me a comment. Please correct me. I got into really hot water on TikTok with I think it's Killian Murphy because it's with a C and it always trips me up.
There's a whole episode of The Great North about that. It's so funny. Will Forte plays a character called Wolf, and he, I think, mispronounces it, and his wife, Honeybee, makes fun of him, I think, for like the whole episode. Like it's the whole thing.
Incredible.
Are you thinking that it might be Gyllenhaal?
I don't know. I don't know. That's
I've
the real
always
answer.
I've always heard it pronounced Gyllenhaal, but you never know. You never that could I mean, listen,
Jake, if you suddenly get into astrology, you want to talk to us and tell us all about it. We don't got people, but you can reach out. It'll be great. Um, so he's got the sun, he's got Neptune, he's got Mercury and Venus and Sagittarius. And some of the lore, right, is he's this man, we get to the sort of the 2010s and he has a lot of like very pro-feminist stuff. He dates, he keeps dating women though that don't really get older. He has a bit of a Leonardo DiCaprio problem. I think when he and Taylor Swift were dating, there was already like a 10-year age gap. There's something significant in their age gap. Yeah, she's born in 89, he's 80, so we're already talking 9 years. Um, and he keeps dating women they're still in their 20s. And so you get this moment of like talking the big talk around feminism and equality. And then in dating and relationships, which can be a fifth house issue. This can be things that come up in the fifth, where his Sagittarius stuff is. It doesn't, is it, are you, the hypocrisy can come out. And that's where I think Sagittarius placements have to be careful, especially the Sagittarius sun. If you are especially leading from a place of morality and philosophy, you sometimes need someone to check your details. And if you're not careful, it can really undermine you. It's very easy to point those things out, to poke holes in it, and to sort of tear you a new one. And this is not, I will be totally honest with you guys. As much as I enjoy Taylor Swift's music, I'm not a Taylor Swift stan, right? This is more about him generally in his dating. I just happen to know it through the lens of her life. Um, so please don't, this is, please don't come at me either pro or anti her. We can have a whole, probably, we could have a whole episode on her chart and why I think she's a Capricorn rising. Um, but that's another day. Before we move on to Capricorn and the Capricorn suns, who I'm also very excited to talk about. Um, Sagittarius. Some questions to think about for y'all as being leaders, which is your passion, your charisma. How can that be a tool to inspire others? Because I think that's where Sagittarius suns can be so potent, is sort of being inspirational and really getting people to take action on something, to really be a motivator. Now, the flip side of that is like, okay, like how can you also make sure you get the details correct, right? These folks are Jupiter ruled. Mercury doesn't do great in Sagittarius, which is part of the problem with it, which is, okay, when are you being hypocritical? When are the things that are going to undermine your message? And sometimes those details don't matter, but sometimes you need to be checked on that and to be like, okay, does this matter? Is this going to undermine my ability to lead and show up in this space? Or is this going to be something that is a non-issue? Because hypocrisy really can undermine your ability, especially if you're doing a lot of more of the activism and philosophical movement work. Okay. Wow, we're chugging along. We are the last three signs. We are moving to Capricorn. And these folks, I don't think these folks don't always get their due. It's a cardinal earth sign. They're Saturn ruled. They're hardworking. And Capricorn as a sign is often focused on building out existing systems, groups, or traditions. And they're really often focused on, okay, how do we survive harsh times? They're thinking about winter, they're thinking about capacity and how to make through sort of worst case scenarios. I know you mentioned Dolly Parton earlier. We're going to talk about Dolly Parton because she is a Capricorn sun. Now, Virgo rising, Virgo moon, Sun, Venus, and Mercury in Capricorn. Um, a lot of her philanthropy, right, is in giving back and reading, right? Is a lot of these sort of practical things around like books and access to books. That's a lot of what she's done. It's not super showy, it's not super flashy, it's not necessarily super radical, but like, do you have access to materials? And can I get you access? Which can also be life-changing, right? Can also really open you to a whole world of information you didn't have access to. There has been a real divide historically. And so I think that sort of Capricorn leadership is quite beautiful. And now I have working 9 to 5 stuck in my head. What a
Listen.
way to make a living.
Oh, you started at a totally different spot than I expected.
Oh, working 9 to 5.
What a way to make a living, barely getting by.
Getting by.
Yeah, love it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, her program. Do we remember what her program's called?
Um, yeah, 30 years. I mean, almost 300 million books. That's almost a book for every person in the United States, just from context. Um, and so I think, you know, there's something very Capricorn about this that is, yeah, she's taking up some space in it. She's using her celebrity. but in some ways is also a very sort of practical way of giving back. When I'm working with these folks, if for some reason Dolly Parton wanted to think about some of this, get pushed a little bit, which is they're often so traditional focused that I'm like, okay, when is it time to start something new? When do you actually need to break out of a system and do your own thing? When is the system the problem, the tradition the problem? And the other piece is sometimes they're so tangible and they're so material focused where I'm like, okay, is the need really the material or is there something else there? Like when we go back to sort of Taurus has this sort of issue as well. The practical can really be the tangible, the material, the earthy side of it is um, there's a physicality that they really like. Can I touch it? Can I see it? Can I feel it? And there are needs that sometimes just our emotional needs, our psychological needs, like there are some needs that aren't tangible, and that's okay. But recognizing as a leader when you need which is still really important. Now, talking about being sort of outside of the system is where we get to Aquarius. These folks are also Saturn rolled, but they're a fixed air sign, right? They um, often find humanity interesting from a distance. They like the idea of people. They're not really people though. They're really curious about what's next, what's the unknown. They're very future focused in a way that Capricorn is a little bit more past focused. The person I want to bring up is actually somebody we've already talked about, and that is Paris Hilton.
Apparently, without even looking at this outline, I sort of these
Osmosis.
listen, they're iconic. They're iconic people for a reason. They have big, strong charts.
Yeah. And so once again, like we talked a little about this earlier, right? She has a Sagittarius rising. She's got Neptune in the first. And the thing that's really interesting is, right, this Mercury Sun Venus combo, right? So the plane with the voice, like Marilyn Monroe, who also had the Sun Mercury together, we see sort of that, right? People think that Paris Hilton has this high breathy voice from the early 2000s. She does not. That's an act. And a lot of people don't know that, which I think is really, really funny. Um, and there is sort of a like distance to her celebrity. I think that's quite interesting. And she's interested in like future forward things. She was very involved with the Meta VR world. She does a lot of electronic techno music these days. She's a DJ. I actually dated a guy for a minute who was a DJ who was really mad when I brought her up as a DJ, which I thought was kind of funny. Um, he's like, she's terrible. Da, da, da. I'm like, okay, I don't know enough about electronic music. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but she goes around the world. Um, and so there's this sort of Aquarian aspect to her persona and what she focuses on, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, she's also been super vocal about the troubled teen industry. That's some of the work that she, takes and does.
Yeah, and so like systems of people, right, becomes a very Aquarius thing, right? How do we have structures and systems in the future forward to dealing with that? Um, Definitely comes up as well. Um, Absolutely. So that is her. Um, and so with these folks, what I like to remind them is, hey, is the next thing always out there? Is it always uh, is it always about the distance and like being able, do you always need to be the one that is seeing the next thing? And similarly, in some ways, interestingly similar to Aries, they sometimes need to do a little more work to bring people to what they're seeing. They might see things that are too far ahead, and they can sometimes have trouble bringing people along that journey. And that can be part of it. The other thing is what's interesting for these folks is the sun is in detriment or exile in Aquarius. They don't always actually love taking up space. They don't always love being in the limelight. And for sometimes these folks, I'm like, hey, when is you taking up space important? When is that something that is necessary as a leader? Kind of like Libra. That sometimes is part of the job. And when is it that you can sort of step back and take your preferred place sort of on the sidelines? All right. Are we ready for the final sun sign? It's the final
Final
sun sign.
sunshine. Wow.
I watched a lot of Arrested Development as a kid. Great TV show.
I think it's just
Um,
hilarious that we started doing it at the same time. I was gonna say countdown, but you said sunshine, so I just went with it.
that's what okay, the other really ridiculous thing that I will sometimes do is when I lift weights, much to my legs are really mad at me. I'm day 2 after a leg day and they're so sore. Sometimes when I'm lifting weights to like motivate myself for my last set of an exercise, I'll be like, it's the final set. And it makes me laugh and then I'm
You
ready
have
to
to
do the
hype
set.
yourself up, man. You have to. You got to do it. Especially when you're working out,
Oh
especially
my
the
God.
last one.
Let me tell you, Bulgarian split squats are not for the tender heart. It's not for your rest day. Fucking sucks.
I don't think
Um,
I could. I don't know what it is. I don't think I could even make my body do it.
okay, I want you to imagine a lunge. Okay. You know what a lunge is?
Yes.
Now imagine your back leg is not on the ground. It is on a bench.
Okay.
And so you then sort of do the lunge and all of the weight is in your front leg.
That sounds really painful.
It's it's something. It's something.
My hypermobile limbs would be like,
Yeah.
I would just be like, I wouldn't be a mess. I would be a mess.
Yeah.
The
It
fact that you can do
is
that is so impressive.
it took me a while to get where I'm at, but yeah, it's definitely there. Um, Granted, I don't have hypermobility, but I do know some folks that are like almost too flexible. And for them, strength training can be really useful, but also I'm like, once again, like talk to your doctor, please. Medical professionals first. I am not a medical professional. Um, but yeah, I remember when I first started Bulgarians, you really learn your muscle imbalances quickly, and it can be brutal for the first couple weeks.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure there's plenty there. I'm sure there are hypermobile people out here who could probably do it, but I am at literally my physical therapy where I'm at right now is
Yeah, we
that,
start with where
you
we're
know what
at.
I mean? Like, I mean, my neck, I'm at neck turning and like strengthening my hips. So,
Great.
you know, but you got to
We
start where you are.
You start where you are, and that's the beauty of it. Um, and where we are finishing today, we are going to come back for part 2 next time with the sun in the houses. Where we are today, though, is Pisces. The sun in Pisces. This is a mutable water sign. This is also Jupiter ruled, but it is highly emotional. It wants connection and healing. It's very transcendental. It's really into ecstatic experiences. And the vibe, I guess, just like we did with some of the others, I feel like we do need 2 examples this time, partially because poor Pisces, you always come at the end of our episodes. We have Justin Bieber and Elizabeth Taylor. So let's start with Justin Bieber. Let's pull up his chart. He's got that Pisces Sun and Venus and Saturn. Um, and it's funny because the first thing that comes to my head is like his like sorry song. Is it too late now to say sorry? Um, but he's really into the music and the arts, and you know, there's this sort of emotional aspect to his work um, that I think people really resonated with for a really long time. I think people still do resonate with. Um, and I think part of what we see, especially with water suns, is that it can give sort of that emotional soft boy sometimes, or sometimes the emotional fuck boy. So I don't know enough about Justin Bieber to say one way or the other, but seeing as he tends to also, I think, really more and more as he gets older, work in more sort of electronic music, sort of has that sort of the desire to work in things that sort of feel mergy and blurry that can feel very like Piscean in that aspect to me.
Like Piscean being described as like mergy and blurry. That's very like, that feels right.
Pisces is, I don't know who described it this way, is I often think of as rivers meeting the ocean, right? It's that sort of ideal of kind of coming into one and blending. And so I think that's something where they tend to come up. Um, the other one I want to bring up, um, I think is very different, is Elizabeth Taylor. If you don't know Elizabeth Taylor, older actress, one of the OGs, sort of like bombshells. Um, Sagittarius rising, Mars, Sun, Mercury, and the North Node, all in Pisces. And there is sort of a like feminine softness that I think is really interesting, especially when she's quite younger. Um,
Yeah, you'll see
and
it probably in more the softness aspect. I want to say she was in Ivanhoe, but you'll see more of a different side of that in Cleopatra.
yeah, yeah, and it's hard too because she does have that Venus in Aries, and so there is sort of a like sharpness that can come across with her femininity, which can be a little bit difficult. But I think it's interesting that a lot of her like leadership, like especially later in life, she's known for working on the AIDS epidemic, right? And really advocating around that and around healing and connection and like destigmatizing that, which to me also feels very like Piscean, feels very much about healing and connection and bringing visibility to some of that, which was so important. I mean, I think it's really hard for folks who are even millennial and younger to recognize just that like so much of the AIDS epidemic was because people didn't talk about it, was because people thought it didn't really affect them because it was mostly impacting queer people, and that it was sort of a moral judgment on them, which is horrifying to say out loud. Um, and that a lot of why it got as bad as it did was political inaction by Reagan and refusing to even name it, which to me is it's a huge stain. There's many stains on the American past, and I think that is only one of the more recent ones. And also, fuck Reagan. If you wonder our politics on this podcast, fuck Reagan is a
Yeah,
big one.
pretty much. The AIDS crisis was so impactful. Um, I don't know. There is a an AIDS memorial quilt.
Yeah,
People were dying so frequently. Um, the numbers were so high that people talk about, not, just waiting to hear which of their friend I can't. I'm even getting goosebumps. Which of their friends were gonna be dead by the end of the day. Um,
yeah,
there is a National AIDS Memorial quilt. It is aidsmemorial.org, and it is the largest community art project in history. It is to remember those who lost their lives to HIV and AIDS. Um, so I would recommend, you can search names on the quilt. You can just go in and view it, but every piece of that quilt was made by or for somebody who passed, and that is not even counting those who were not named.
yeah. Um, a great example of just the sheer impact of the epidemic. There's an image. Um, this image is I think really important. They did this portrait um, of basically how many people had died um, by 1989. 115 of the people, like the people in white are the ones that survived. That's um, seven plus 115. It gets you 100, I think, in 22. That's the ratio.
And for context, the timeline of HIV and AIDS at hiv.gov reflects that domestic HIV and AIDS, the epidemic, the first reported cases were in 1981.
Yeah.
So that's 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So that just sort of speaks to like Elizabeth Taylor was an imperfect person, and there's lots of things where she was great, lots of things where she was problematic, but certainly her work around AIDS is something that is commendable and something that I do want to highlight because she once again was willing to bring light to something that was really controversial at the time.
Just it goes to show that speaking up when something is, wrong, it really can be impactful and make a difference. And like, you know, it's important to make your voice heard in the here and now.
Yeah. When it comes to Pisces sun, I think the ability to connect, the ability to transcend and blur the lines when the lines are fucked up is really, really powerful. Um, and can be a real tool for helping us get beyond boundaries, black and white thinking that is holding us back. Um, and I think sometimes being a leader knows when to have that connection. When is it that we need to transcend? And when is it that we're escaping and avoiding? Right? When is it that we are talking about a future or saying this reality doesn't matter and we need to be thinking about this other future thing? But people are actively getting harmed in the here and now, right? And so knowing that balance is I think the hard thing for Pisces suns. When is that future fantasy something that is inspiring, and when is it avoidant? Is I think the real thing I like to highlight with them. And also, like, we can't always be transcendent. We can't always be merging with folks. And so the other thing I like to remind folks is say, hey, when is it that we need separation? We need to sort of be ourselves in order to allow for that connection long term. I think this is a time frame that when we're living, I really do believe in Pluto and Aquarius that leadership and power is not necessarily from traditional centered places right now, and that it's going to take all of us to build a future that we really want to be in. And all of us are required to step up and to shine in a particular way. And what I hope, if you can take away anything from this, is to think about what are the ways where you shine? What are the ways that you have unique gifts for this moment to lead based on your sun, based on your sign? Next time, we're going to talk about the sun in the different houses, what topics, what themes might be really resonant for you. And then there's, as always, talking about if you really want to kind of get deeper on your sun, a personal reading, looking at the aspects it makes, looking at what if your sun isn't in Leo, where is Leo in your chart? All of these things together can really bring together and synthesize what you uniquely have to offer. Because I do think that each of us have something really beautiful to give to the world. And the trick is to know how to take up that space and when to take it. Um, when are you holding yourself back and when are you holding somebody else back? Is the sort of big things that I'm obsessing about these days, anyway.
I had kind of a fun idea.
Okay.
That might be a nice little self-care exercise regarding the sun, because the sun is, of course, a luminary and it illuminates things, right? So maybe what you can do if you have, a piece of paper, or if you feel like going all the way, you can make a paper lantern or a lantern. Write all the positive things about your sun sign that you'd like to illuminate in your personality. And you can like draw a lantern, and put it out in the sun.
Aw, I love
Um,
that.
and maybe, or like if you want to make it a lantern, you can make a paper lantern and put a little candle in it or something. I thought that might be a nice, it just seems so, since we're talking about our sun signs, and since, we focused, with the moon and self-care and stuff like that, I think drawing that back in here, kind of also thinking back to like self-care, and as we're discovering more about ourselves, what are some things like, even thinking about how I want to connect more with my Leo, right? Especially those like less shadowy aspects of Leo, right? Not trying
Yeah.
to connect with the shade too hard. So I was like, oh, that sounds kind of like a nice activity. So I figured I'd share that with you guys since it kind of came to me right here at the end.
I love that. I
Yeah.
think that's a fantastic sort of way to both reflect and like have a little fun paper craft activity if you like doing stuff with your hands. That's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
we will see you next time. We'll talk about the sun and the different houses. We'll have more infamous and famous examples for you all. Um, and until then, hope you stay sane and be kind to yourself. We are literally recording this during eclipse season, so I'm definitely going to be trying to find some time to rest and nap.
I see a little peek of who we've got coming. So yeah, famous and infamous are definitely on the list. Thank you again, Katie, for all your expertise as usual, and we will see you next time. Bye.